Hey guys, welcome to Subject Soup, a channel focused on bringing you the top news story of the week. Now, let's get into the video. As week 3 opens, the renewed USA-Iran conflict is widening through American airstrikes, Iranian retaliation, and a struggle over the Strait of Hormuz, now shaping military decisions, energy markets, and diplomatic pressure all across the wider region. The latest fighting is not the war's third week overall. It is the third week of renewed combat after a fragile June agreement failed, attacks on commercial shipping resumed, and Washington and Tehran returned to military escalation with fewer limits. That agreement briefly reduced the fighting and reopened parts of the Strait of Hormuz. But Washington and Tehran never shared one understanding of its maritime terms, who could enforce them, or whether Iran held authority over international passage. Iran treated the agreement as recognition of its security role in the strait. Washington argued that all commercial ships must have free, safe, and unrestricted passage through the waterway without delays, inspections, political conditions, or tolls. This disagreement became the central dispute. Tehran warned that ships on routes it deemed unauthorized could be stopped, while Washington rejected Iran's claimed power to control international transit, restrict movement, or impose maritime conditions. When tankers again faced threats and attacks in early July, U.S. forces opened a new air campaign against Iran's coastal defenses, missile positions, drone systems, surveillance sites, command facilities, logistics hubs, and patrol craft near Hormuz. CENTCOM noted the strikes were intended to reduce Iran's ability to threaten shipping. Tehran called the bombing illegal aggression and promised retaliation against American forces, regional partners, and infrastructure tied to Washington's campaign. Across successive nights, American aircraft, drones, and warships struck surveillance systems, air defenses, command centers, logistics depots, hangars, missile sites, drone facilities, coastal positions, and other military infrastructure inside Iran. The operation later expanded beyond the coastline, with reported attacks on bridges, tunnels, military bases, airports, communications, power systems, transport routes, and other critical infrastructure, raising risks for nearby civilian communities. That widening target list shifted the conflict's direction. Strikes described as protection for shipping increasingly threaten transportation, utilities, communications, water access, and other essential services required daily by Iranian civilians. During week 3, Iran answered the strikes with missiles and drones aimed at U.S. facilities and regional partners, including sites in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan. Gulf governments reported interceptions, damage, blazes, and service disruptions. Kuwait said an Iranian attack struck the power and water facility, causing a fire and forcing several units offline. Tehran described such attacks as retaliation against countries supporting or enabling Washington's military campaign across the Gulf. American casualties also increased. By July 22, reported U.S. troop deaths in the wider conflict had reached 18. Other personnel were wounded or missing after Iranian attacks struck key bases and military positions across the wider Gulf region. These strikes were not merely symbolic. Iran showed that it could kill American personnel, damage Allied infrastructure, and force Gulf governments to spend heavily on air defense, repairs, emergency measures, evacuations, and public safety warnings. At sea, the Strait of Hormuz became the conflict's most important pressure point. Before the war, about one-fifth of the world's oil supply and major volumes of liquefied natural gas moved through this narrow waterway during normal daily trade flows. The United States receives less oil through Hormuz than many Asian economies. But Americans remain exposed because crude is priced globally. Any disruption can raise gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, shipping costs, and inflation far beyond the Middle East. Shipping data showed how fear can nearly close a waterway without a formal blockade. Crossings fell from a pre-war average near 125 vessels per day to only a few ships on several days, as renewed fighting intensified across Hormuz. Some tankers stopped, turned around, or waited outside the danger zone. Others reduced tracking signals as insurers warned operators about missiles, drones, mines, detention, misidentification, and the danger of crews becoming trapped far out at sea. The International Maritime Organization condemned attacks on civilian shipping and rejected mandatory tolls. It said passage through an international strait must not be threatened, obstructed, delayed, suspended, or applied selectively under the law. The human cost at sea was often hidden behind oil prices and insurance. The IMO said seafarers had been killed, while thousands more were stranded, delayed, or exposed to danger as governments used shipping lanes as political leverage during week 3. Oil prices reflected the danger. Brent moved above $100 a barrel, while some physical grades approached 110. U.S. gasoline also climbed, showing how quickly a distant maritime crisis can reach household budgets within days. Higher oil prices spread beyond gas stations. Diesel raises trucking, farming, mining, and construction costs. Jet fuel affects airlines, while shipping delays increase the price of imported goods and can worsen inflation across major economies, too. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates can bypass part of Hormuz through pipelines, but those routes cannot replace the full pre-war flow. That makes terminals such as Yanbu more important and more exposed to attacks that could disrupt oil exports. Later in week 3, Yemen's Houthi movement claimed attacks on Saudi oil facilities at Yanbu and Jazan. Missiles aimed at Yanbu were reportedly intercepted, while smoke near Jazan showed how the conflict could spread beyond the Gulf and disrupt exports. The Houthi attacks opened a second maritime front. Hormuz controls access to the Persian Gulf, while Bab el-Mandeb links the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. Threats at both choke points could force ships far around Africa and disrupt global commerce too. Washington says its narrow goal is safe navigation and an end to attacks on commercial vessels. Its broader strategy is to raise the military and economic cost until Tehran accepts unrestricted passage and returns to negotiations under more pressure. Iran appears to be using an asymmetric strategy. It cannot match U.S. air and naval power directly, so it threatens air bases, ships, energy sites, and narrow sea lanes where low-cost missiles and drones can create outsized disruption worldwide, too. That strategy gives Tehran leverage, but it too carries grave new risks. Attacks on neutral ships and civilian linked infrastructure can isolate Iran, alarm Gulf states, invite stronger retaliation, and deepen hardship inside Iran during a wider war. Washington faces its own limits. Air power can destroy static sites, but it cannot ensure that every mobile launcher, drone team, fast boat, or covert network is gone. More strikes may harden resistance instead of forcing surrender or securing peace. The ceasefire failed because it deferred hard questions. Washington wanted free navigation with no tolls or attacks. Tehran wanted sanctions relief, recognition of its security role, and guarantees that U.S. commitments would survive the next crisis. The nuclear issue still shadows the conflict. With inspectors having reduced access, every strike on nuclear linked sites raises fears of hidden activity, lost evidence, radioactive danger, and a harder path back to credible monitoring and diplomacy. Diplomacy has not disappeared. Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, China, Russia, and Iraq have all supported dialogue or mediation. Yet, Washington and Tehran remain divided over shipping rights, sanctions, security guarantees, and which side must move first now. A pause in American strikes near the end of week 3 created limited space for talks, but it was not a ceasefire. Iran also reduced some direct attacks, while Houthi operations showed that the wider regional confrontation remained active and dangerous. Any durable agreement will need more than promises. Ships require clear routes, safety guarantees, communications procedures, and neutral monitoring, while both sides need synchronized measures that reduce the risks of cheating or sudden retaliation. The most dangerous trigger would be a mass casualty strike, a sunken tanker, a major attack on Gulf energy infrastructure, or a deadly mistake involving aircraft or warships. Any one of these events could rapidly overwhelm diplomatic restraint today. Information warfare now shapes public understanding. Washington and Tehran release edited footage, casualty claims, and success claims. Viewers should separate verified reporting from government statements, battlefield claims, and unconfirmed rumors. At the end of week 3, neither side has won decisively. The United States can strike deeply, while Iran can disrupt bases, shipping, and energy markets. The next phase will hinge on whether pressure produces an accord or triggers a wider regional war.